Welcome to another edition of CandisLive. As always, it is a pleasure to be with you today. Now, I have some interesting little tidbits for us to go over and to explore. So come on in, let's get started. Well, you know, one of the hardest things anyone has to do is to listen. I know. I think that I do it pretty well. I think that I'm a good listener. But the truth of the matter is, no one really knows how good of a listener they are until the person on the other side, asks them a question. What did I say? What do you think about what I said? What do you think I should do? And it is at that point that you realize that, maybe I was not listening. Maybe I didn't hear that. Maybe I didn't get what was said. And so I was reflecting on how much I listen and how much we should listen, not only to each other, but to ourselves. Now, as a kid, I would spend a lot of time interacting with my family and friends and checking out what was happening in the world around me, because I was pretty much silent until I was about 11. And that's when I really started to talk. So I spent a lot of time listening. And I remember when I decided that, you know what? I need to start talking more. I need to start interacting with my environment. The first person I decided to truly listen to was myself. Yes, myself. And I know that sounds like a strange way to start out, but it's the way that I started out because there was one thing I needed to know before I could engage anyone else. I needed to know what my voice sounded like. What were my opinions? What were my views? How do I see the world? How do I understand the world? How do I see myself? And so what I would do, I was about 11 years old at the time, and what I would do is I would sit in the front of the mirror at home, and I would look myself in the eye. And first I started out with saying nothing, just making eye contact, just practicing looking myself in the eye. And it became a great tool in having conversations with other people, because I had already developed how to, pay attention, how to connect. Because when I stood in front of that mirror as a child, I wasn't just looking at myself. I was looking and seeking from myself some understanding. I was looking at my eyes, I was looking at my ears, and whilst I was looking, I was having this inner dialogue about what I thought about what I was seeing. And so after many, many months of doing this, I decided I am going to start having conversations with people. What would I talk about? I had absolutely no idea what those first conversations would have been about. But I knew this much. The first thing I would have to do in order to make these conversations make sense to the people I was talking to and to myself was that I would have had to listen. So my first year of high school, that's what I did. I made a few friends, and I would sit down and I would listen to them talk about everything under the sun. They would talk about school, they would talk about home, they would talk about books, they would talk about boys, they would talk about girls, sports, they would talk about any and everything. And I would just sit there and I would listen. And whenever someone spoke, I looked them dead in the eye, not drawing any conclusions, because I didn't have any idea what they would be talking about. I didn't have any idea what perspective they would be speaking from. And so I listened with the intent of hearing about their experience, about their perspective, and about whatever it was that they were trying to convey. And I realized something. They were looking at me the way that I looked at myself in the mirror. When they said something, they were searching my eyes to see if I got it, to see if a spark went off in my eyes, to show that I connected with them. They were looking at my body movements, and sometimes when I shifted my weight in the seat, they would shift their weight in the seat, or I leaned forward, they would lean forward, or sometimes they would lean back in response to that, and I thought that was very interesting. Now remember, I was only 11 years old, and I was only trying out this listening thing. But whilst I was sitting there quietly, looking at the people that was sharing with me, I recognized something about how we listen, how we see the world from a silent perspective. And the first thing I realized with me sitting down, listening to myself, I realized that at that point in my life, at just 11 years old, that my inner voice was very harsh. My inner voice demanded things of me that I didn't feel as though I was capable of doing. I had not yet learned how to be the person that my inner voice said I needed to be. And after listening even closely, I realized that the voice I was hearing internally was not really my voice, but it was the voices of the people that I had come in contact with that had told me, hey, you have to speak up. You have to do this. You look this way. You look that way. This is how you think. This is how you smell. This is, every single voice that I had heard up to that point is the voice that I was hearing when I looked into the mirror. And I remember feeling so sad and depressed about that. Why am I hearing these things? Why am I seeing these things? Why, when I look at me, the things that had been said to me over the years as a child, these are the things that I'm seeing. These are the things that I'm hearing. These are the messages that I'm hearing. And I remember being 11 years old and deciding to change that message, deciding to change that internal message, deciding to do away with all of the side voices, deciding to do away with all of the things that I'd heard my friends say, that their family members had said to them, all of their insecurities, all of their concerns, all of my family concerns. I decided at 11 years old, sitting in front of a mirror, looking at myself intensely, I decided that, guess what, girl? You are going to hear your voice for the first time. You are going to begin to define your voice. You are going to know what you think and why you think it. And we are going to start. And I said we, because that's how big the problem seems. It's like, oh no, this is not a me problem. This is a we problem. It's me, myself, and I. All of us got to get together and talk about this. And so I sat there and I began to dissect the views that came into my mind whilst I looked at myself. I looked at my face and I looked at how slim I was. And the voice that came to my mind was how many times I heard people say to me, oh, you too skinny, you bony, man, you're like a skeleton. And I remember saying to myself in that moment, as I heard that voice, I said to myself, no, you're slim. You're slim. This is the way you are built. This is the way God designed you. This is the way that you are supposed to be. You are this way because you are fit. You are agile. You walk a lot. You walk everywhere. And so I explained to myself, girl, listen here. This is why you are who you are. Those other voices you're hearing, they have nothing to do with you. They have to do with other people's perception of your reality. And the reality is, you just slim. It is genetics. You walk everywhere. You eat right. You can't be anything else but slim. This is you. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, people are always staring at you. What? Maybe you don't have a nice smile, all right? And then I smiled. And when I smiled, I looked at my lips. I was like, maybe, well, I don't know. And then again, I allowed the things that people had said to kind of filter into my consciousness, because you hear things all the time, but it's subconscious. People say things to you and you're like, oh, I brushed that off. I'm not thinking about that. I'm not thinking about that. But it gets into your psyche and it resonates in your psyche, and you start to transform who you are based on those voices, based on what has been said to you. And so I looked at my lips and I was like, oh, okay, all right. Everyone's lips don't look like that. And I decided that I was going to focus on what's beautiful about them. And then I said, ooh, look, I see people drawing lines on their lips all the time. You don't have to draw no lines, girl. You got some pretty lips. And then I burst a smile. And I said, whoo, now that's a smile. I've never seen that on anybody. And notice, whilst I was listening, I wasn't just listening to hear words from myself, I was listening to decode all of the information that I was receiving from around me, because that's what I was doing. I was reprogramming myself. I looked into my eyes and I said to myself, ooh, wow, no wonder people get nervous when you make full eye contact with them. Your eyes are deep. I mean, you could fall in those. And I wasn't trying to be, I wasn't trying to be arrogant. I wasn't trying to pump myself up, but I was trying to help me understand exactly what was happening outside of me and help me to relate that to what was happening inside of me. Because when I looked into my eyes, I remembered all of the times that people have walked away and like, oh, why you got to stare at me like that? And then I reflect on, you know, what were you thinking, Candis? This is what they said, but what were you thinking in that moment? What were you thinking about? And 9 out of 10 times, I'm thinking about, wow, that's interesting. Or that person is really beautiful. Or I wonder if we could be friends. Or I know this thing. I wonder if they would be interested in that. And so in my mind, my internal voice was always saying things to me that was like, we can help, we can encourage, we can build up. You know what, I have this store. I wonder if they would be interested. You know, I could just, this person looks like they need a hug. Let me give them some love. Let me get in there, give them some love. But I didn't know how they would react. And so rather than respond by actually moving in and hugging someone, I would just stand and I would look. And then I would smile. And when I looked and I smiled, people would be like, that's kind of weird. It never really mattered to me what people thought about what I was thinking about. Because at that point, my focus was simply on listening to myself and identifying my own voice. And see, it is so important for you as an individual to identify your own voice. You know, oftentimes we get into struggles with people, power struggles with people, because they're giving us advice and we don't necessarily want to take it, or we feel as though they're overpowering us, or they're forcing themselves on us. And a lot of times we struggle with these type of interactions because we do not know our own voice. You know, sometimes someone may be talking to you and you may agree with them, but because you're remembering the conversations about, you know, what someone else's interaction is with them or what has been with them, you're dismissing absolutely everything that is being said. A perfect example of that, I believe, is a few years ago, I was doing a summer camp and I had a group of kids, mostly teenagers. And I said to them, I said, you know what, tell me, what do you think of the government? Who is the government? And they started to list all of the politicians that were in office at the time. And so I said, no, they're not the government. Who is the government? And so everyone started looking around. Who's the government? It's a trick question, eh? Who is the government? And then they start saying, you know what my mummy say, and my daddy say, and the neighbors say, and the person around the corner say, and it was on TV, and it was on the radio, and the man on the street says, and the person in the bus said, and they came up with everything in this world as a conclusion to who the government is. And so I said to them, I said, you know who the government is? The government is you. You are the government of this country, because you get to make a decision. But here's the thing. The reason why you don't feel as though you are the government of the country is because you don't know your own voice. You don't know what you believe. In everything that you guys have said to me, I have not heard one of you say, I feel as though this person or this entity is the government because of X, Y, and Z. Your opinion. Each of you has said, oh, it's because my mother said, because my father said, because the neighbor said, I heard it on the bus, I heard it on the radio, I heard it on TV. And when I asked the question, what do you think? No one had an answer. And so I told them we're going to do a little experiment. You're going to sit quietly for the next 5 minutes. And you're going to think about what you think a government of a country should be? What do you think the government of this country should be? And during your thought process, and I had them write it down, these are the thoughts I want you to eliminate as you think about this. Everything your mother ever said to you about the government, you're going to cross those things out. Everything you heard on the bus, you're going to cross those things out. Everything you heard on TV, you're going to cross those things out. Everything that you've heard from someone other than yourself, you're going to cross those things out. Now, after you take away all of those things, what do you think the government is? No one had an answer. No one had an answer. And the reason for that is because they had never taken the time to think about what it is they thought, and they surely have never taken the time to listen to what they think. So I say to you, I challenge you, listen to you. Take the time, sit in a mirror, eliminate the voices on the outside. See what the voice on the inside is saying. Until next time, CandisLive. Thank you for tuning into this episode of CandisLive. As always, it is a pleasure to be here with you. And I want you to remember to listen. Listen. If you don't listen to anyone else in this world, remember to listen to you. Know your inner voice. Know what you think, what you want, what you desire, and what is happening with you. Until next time, I love you.